Right now, almost 1 in 3 car buyers want to buy completely online, and if your dealership can't close that deal, someone else will. Accelerate My Deal Elite gives you real online checkout, ID and insurance verification, and dealer control without changing the way you work. Visit dealdoers.com to learn more.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Monday, March 2nd, 2026. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Today on the show, Honda ships U.S.-built models back to Japan for the first time since 1988. European auto suppliers face a poly-crisis with 350,000 jobs at risk. And First Brand's bankruptcy heads toward resolution with 4 potential buyers. Plus, we'll hear from Lei Xing, an independent analyst on the Chinese auto industry, about why he thinks the threat from Chinese EV makers is not as dire as many experts believe.
Okay, the Chinese are here. They're going to produce in the U.S. The Fords and GMs, they're done. I don't buy that. It's just overblown. I laugh at it.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Honda is bringing Acura to Japan for the first time by shipping U.S.-built models back across the Pacific. The automaker will export the high-performance Acura Integra Type S and Honda Passport Trail Sport Elite to Japan starting in the second half of this year. Both will keep their American specs, including left-hand drive, despite Japan being a right-hand drive country. It's Honda's first reverse import since 1988, when it shipped Ohio-built Accords back to its home country. The move comes as Japan eases import rules and faces pressure over its $34 billion trade surplus with the U.S. We'll have more on this story in a minute with our own Urvaksh Karkaria. European auto suppliers are in what experts are calling a poly-crisis, hit by slow EV adoption, Chinese competition, and automaker pressure to cut prices. The European Association of Automotive Suppliers warns 350,000 jobs are at risk by 2030. Major German suppliers like Bosch, ZF, Continental, and Schaeffler have already announced 34,000 cuts. Half of suppliers plan to reduce Western Europe production capacity as profit margins sink below sustainable levels. Meanwhile, 11 of 16 planned European battery factories have been delayed or canceled. And bankrupt supplier First Brands has 4 potential buyers lined up for its remaining auto parts factories, 3 of which supply Ford Motor Company. The company's been operating week to week with automaker support after running short on cash. Ford has paid for parts in advance and covered administrative expenses to keep operations running. Creditor groups remain in mediation for 2 more weeks to finalize a resolution deal. The proposed sales aim to preserve thousands of jobs and avoid a full liquidation that would shutter remaining facilities. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all of those stories at autonews.com. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into that Honda story with our own Urvaksh Karkaria, who's been covering this for Automotive News. Urvaksh, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having me. Hope you had a good weekend.
Same to you, sir. This story is really interesting, and I can't help but wonder, does it seem to you like this is about trade politics, or is this actual market demand that's driving this decision?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. It seems to be, at least in Honda's case, it seems to be more about optics than it is about significant demand for these cars in Japan. The reason being that Honda will be exporting these US-made cars in left-hand drive mode, while Japan, as you know, is a right-hand drive market. Obviously, the Germans have done this in the past and other automakers have done it, but it's for niche audiences, the enthusiast markets. According to Auto Forecast Solutions, because of the drive configuration, the forecasting company expects that Honda would sell only about 5,000 to 6,000 units combined between both the Passport, Trail Sport, and the Acura Integra in Japan. So I don't think Honda expects this to be a high volume move, but it kind of helps to some extent sort of satisfy the Trump administration, which has been pushing for more American production. And it also will help somewhat offset the huge trade imbalance between Japan and the United States.
You know, you mentioned in your piece that Toyota and Nissan are also looking at reverse imports.
Yeah.
Do you see this becoming a broader strategy for Japanese automakers to address these trade imbalances?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a ripple effect. When one starts doing it, then the others kind of follow. Though I think they're doing it for different reasons. I think in Nissan's case in particular, exporting to the Japanese market could be driven by the fact that, they have excess capacity in the US. Nissan is considering exporting the Murano and Pathfinder to Japan, while the Pathfinder, which was refreshed this year, is seeing decent demand. The long in the tooth Murano is having some demand issues, and Nissan is managing the supply, but this is also a quick way of moving some of the production here to the Japanese market and reducing the pressure on the dealer network in terms of inventory.
Fascinating stuff. We'll keep an eye on this as your reporting moves forward on this. Urvaksh, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Drive.
Thank you, Jake.
Coming up, we'll hear from analyst Lei Xing on why he thinks fears about Chinese EV makers are overblown. That's next on Daily Drive. Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com.
Hey, quick question. What if nearly 1 in 3 customers who walked onto your lot were ready to buy before they ever got there? That's not a hypothetical. That's actually happening right now. Almost 1 in 3 consumers say they want to complete their car purchase completely online. The question is your dealership able to close that deal online, or are you handing it off to someone who is? That's where AutoTrader's Accelerate My Deal Elite online checkout comes in. Accelerate My Deal Elite isn't just another digital retailing tool that takes the dealer out of the equation. It's built with you in mind. You stay in control of the deal. Pricing, terms, the whole thing. While your customers do the heavy lifting up front from the comfort of their home. We're talking real online checkout, built-in ID and insurance verification, and a seamless experience that fits right into the way your team already works. No ripping out your process, no retraining your whole staff, just more deals done faster. And here's the thing, your competitors aren't sitting on this. The dealers who move first are the ones capturing those online buyers. Don't let that be someone else's win. Reach out to your AutoTrader rep today and ask about Accelerate My Deal Elite, or visit dealdoers.com to learn more. Your customers are ready. The question is, are you?
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer. You've probably heard the narrative that Chinese EV makers pose an existential threat to legacy automakers, that once they enter Western markets, it could be game over for the likes of Ford and GM. But analyst Lei Xing isn't buying it. He spoke with our own Molly Boygan on the Shift podcast about why he thinks the threat is overblown and why it could take decades for Chinese brands to truly establish themselves in the U.S. market, just like Hyundai and Kia did. Here's a piece of that conversation.
You were talking earlier about the possibility of Chinese manufacturers working with domestic manufacturers, and I think this is a really interesting point. How do you view that strategy for the Western automakers? Because, as I've said, analysts and industry people, executives, other folks that I talk to see the entry of Chinese vehicles to the market as almost like a death knell for the domestic auto industry. And at the same time, to not partner with Chinese automakers would also appear to be a mistake. So why do you think they're, and I guess actually to back it up further, how in depth are those conversations at this point? Like how far along is the possibility of partnership between the domestic auto industry and the Chinese automakers?
So we have to find some kind of middle ground, right? the narrative that it's a existential crisis, there's some truth to it. The narrative that the Chinese, I mean, Elon Musk said it, right? They'll dominate without the protection in place. I think it's overblown because in order for the Chinese to establish themselves, I think coming in and getting a foothold is only the beginning. But from there until you establish yourself as a kind of a Americanized brand, I think that will take decades. Just like what Hyundai and Kia did, right? Hyundai, Kia, I'm an owner of a Hyundai. And I don't feel like Hyundai is a Korean brand. I feel like they're just an American brand. Whatever it's selling, Toyota, Volkswagen, any of these foreign automakers selling in the US, I don't feel as much as the politicizing of it being a German brand or it being a Korean brand or it being a Chinese brand. But for China, for the Chinese brands, that kind of a narrative is much more blown out of proportion, I think. Because right, the Chinese, are they going to compete in the pickup, right?
Right.
What sells in the U.S. market? I think it's only going to be slowly establishing a foothold, and then we can talk about Chinese being where the Koreans are today in the U.S. market, how they're involved in the local communities, right? How they're involved to that kind of point. It's going to take years. And what Canada is doing is actually, right, giving a small kind of quota, 49,000 units, increase that a little bit, 50,000, 60,000, but it's still such a small portion of the market. At the end of the day, at the beginning, it's more to give consumer an extra option or affordability rather than, okay, the Chinese are here, they're going to produce in the US, the Fords and GMs, they're done. I don't buy that. It's just overblown. I laugh at it.
I think that you're the first person I've talked to who said that, but I think you make an interesting point because what's really happened, given that the industry is so global, is that, as you said, some of the Asian automakers, Toyota, Hyundai, Kia, have basically, as you said, they're not the domestic auto industry, but in a way they do feel like domestic brands, and they have manufacturing footprints here in the United States, and they employ American workers and all of this. So it sounds like you're saying that the Chinese will follow that path to be entrenched in the domestic auto industry.
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that process is going to take some time. I think the easy part is not actually coming into the US and getting let's say we set up a joint venture with Ford. BYD and Ford supposedly set up a joint venture, right? Or Xiaomi. Aside from the geopolitical kind of the red light, right? That presents, it's just a kind of a starting point. And until you get to being a established brand or automaker in the U.S., that takes significant amount of resources, investment, and time for that to happen. At the same time, overcoming this politicizing of China.
Right.
If at all. That's what I'm kind of pointing to, yeah.
In our conversation, it sounds like the Department of Commerce rule comprises the main regulatory obstacle. There are, as you say, kind of like cultural or organizational obstacles to like meaningful Chinese entry to the U.S. market. I think it's really interesting that the tariff actually doesn't appear to be that big of a deal. I'm thinking in particular of the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles established under the Biden administration. Is that because the vehicles are so much cheaper to begin with? Like that doesn't appear to be a meaningful obstacle? Or how are you thinking about the role of tariffs as Chinese automakers look to enter the U.S. market?
Well, the tariff is still a huge obstacle. I mean, you compare the 6.2% in Canada now for after the reduction compared to 100-some percent, right? There's the fentanyl component that, given announcement by the Supreme Court, there's actually a portion of that should be gone, right? I forget the percentage I don't know, 25% or something. But still, it's still at least 100% plus the 2.5%, right? The number probably is higher, but that's a huge wall. It's one of many. There's a ICV software hardware ban. There's the Terras, and then you have to meet the NHTSA and the FMVSS, whether you import or produce in the U.S. And then just there's also these various pushbacks, right? The NADA recently, as association, they will support blocking the Chinese automakers, right? This was said on record. But they will not stop their members from being kind of in a franchise if they were to, the dealer laws are even different in the U.S. For example, in Europe, how it works is that you could house different brands under the same roof. So half of a dealership could be selling a Mercedes, and the other half are selling an X-Bomb. So this is it's actually called an Auto House. I was in Germany last year, and that's actually what happens. I think in the U.S. there's no way you can do that given the current, and that has to deal with the cost of it, being in the same roof on the same location, utilizing half of the dealership. Right, from a cost perspective, it saves you money. But in the U.S., it's both cost and the legal aspect, right? So there's these various sets of walls that are set up, and then let's say, if somehow the agreement is to produce made in America, you hire American workers, then contingent upon that, some of these walls go down. That's what I'm kind of thinking of could happen. The product safety quality thing is probably the easiest. The Chinese automakers, they're there. They caught up. I mean, bar none, they caught up in terms of product quality. I have no doubt that they can meet whatever the standards. But you still need to take. It's a process that you still need to partake to get there.
You can hear our own Molly Boygan's full conversation with analyst Lei Xing on the latest episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, available now. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Kellen Walker. Thanks to our own Urvaksh Kakaria for his reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from Lois Jones of our sibling publication, Automotive News Europe. You can get the latest news on trade strategy, supplier challenges, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Dan Hirsch of Alex Partners about what the conflict in Iran will mean for the auto industry.
If this were to escalate in any meaningful way, it could certainly become as big or bigger than the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which had severe disruption in a number of ways.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.